You know, Scooby Doo's cool and all, but to be honest, I was always more of a Scooby Don't fan myself. Wait. Okay, okay. Next time I'll do better. No, wait. Okay, alright. Sorry, I know those jokes were doo doo. No, wait. Scoob is a reboot of the Scooby Doo franchise and shows how Scooby, Shaggy, Fred, Daphne, and Velma all got together and became successful teen detectives. Though the Mystery Inc. gang faces their biggest challenge yet when Shaggy and Scooby are recruited by the superhero Blue Falcon to stop the evil Dick Dastardly from unleashing a mysterious dogpocalypse upon the world. I was a big Cartoon Network kid growing up. I think it's way better than Nickelodeon, to be perfectly honest. And growing up, Scooby Doo was a big part of Cartoon Network at that time. And I mean a big part. I've seen it all. The original show, the new Scooby Doo movies, A Pup Named Scooby Doo, Scooby Doo and Scrappy Doo, The 13 Ghosts of Scooby Doo, and my personal favorite, Scooby's All-Star Laugh Olympics. That last one brought together nearly all of Hanna-Barbera's creations into one show. And that's exactly what this movie sets up, being the first installment of a proposed Hanna-Barbera cinematic universe. Which is something I'm not sure we really needed, but being a fan of all these characters growing up, I'm cool with it. This didn't waste too much time setting up these characters to cross over. The Blue Falcon is established early on as a well-known superhero who Shaggy idolizes, and we see that within the first 5 to 10 minutes as the movie focuses on a younger Mystery Inc. gang. But we get a twist when Shaggy and Scooby finally meet the Blue Falcon, and it turns out the original superhero retired and his son Brian has taken over. And he's voiced by Mark Wahlberg. Now, this version of the Blue Falcon wants to do the right thing, but he's also childish, he gets easily distracted, he's all about image. I was a little taken aback by it at first, and I still have mixed feelings about it. The Blue Falcon, as he's portrayed here, isn't always the most likable, and the problem is he's featured heavily throughout this movie. While at times he can be caring, on the other hand, he can also be a whiny manchild. And on top of that, it essentially just sounds like Mark Wahlberg. Like, I know celebrities doing voiceover work has been the new norm for years now, but the character talks so much in Mark Wahlberg's normal voice that I didn't see the Blue Falcon. I just saw Mark Wahlberg. He does a mix of his tough guy shtick and his dopey shtick. He tries to be intimidating, but he's also surprised by every little thing. Like when he first appears, he makes this big entrance and the visual presentation isn't what he thought it was going to be. And he's criticizing it and he's taken aback by how the flashy colors and all the special effects looked. Honestly, it's going to be a little polarizing, but on the other hand, I will admit, Mark Wahlberg might just be Mark Wahlberg here, but he actually is pretty funny. See, when Mark Wahlberg does get into a role, he puts a lot of energy into it, and it can be entertaining to watch. So while this portrayal of the Blue Falcon isn't what I hoped for, it's still fitting because it keeps within the same high energy tone of this movie. And that energy is the main reason why I like this movie in general. See, in terms of story and character, this really isn't that strong. Part of the plot involves Scooby being chosen by Blue Falcon because he's the descendant of another dog and he's the chosen one. But meanwhile, his legendary ancestry is only brought up like so many times. It's kind of tossed to the side for most of the movie after it was first introduced. I also wouldn't call the animation something to write home about. It's not bad, it just feels more like generic 3D computer animation. Nothing really stood out about it. But where this movie suffers in animation and story, it makes up for it in humor and its lighthearted tone. It's heavily rooted in physicality. There are a ton of exaggerated facial expressions and over-the-top reactions when a character is shocked or surprised by something. It kept in the spirit of the original series. I'd say if you're familiar with the old Scooby Doo shows or really any of the old Hanna-Barbera cartoons, you'll get rewarded with some nice Easter eggs referencing them. And we're even treated to a scene-by-scene recreation of the old Scooby Doo theme song, so that was nice. The humor is mainly slapstick in the vein of the original show, as well as poking fun at some old tropes that Scooby Doo is known for. Like you get jokes making fun of unmasking villains, Scooby snacks, lines such as "I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids." Though surprisingly, there are a lot of jokes thrown in there that adults will also enjoy. And they're spoken as if they're throwaway lines, and they'll catch you off guard, and when you realize what's said, you'll burst out laughing. Like one of my favorite lines was when a bully decided to explain what Halloween was to Shaggy. I won't give away what's said, but it's so hilarious because he says it with such a rapid-fire, deadpan delivery. But at the heart of this movie is the relationship between Scooby and Shaggy. They're very much at the front and center of this movie, sometimes to the detriment of the other characters. They are by far the most developed, whereas everyone else, isn't so much. But there's an earnest theme about the importance of friendship seen through their interactions, which I'm sure most audiences, especially kids, will find value in. There is a little bit of forced conflict between the two that I found to be a bit contrived. Like, Scooby gets very close with the Blue Falcon, and Shaggy gets jealous, and it's whatever. But whenever it's a scene of them having just a nice moment together, it was cute. So I want to talk about the rest of the cast as well as the characters themselves, because I feel like there's going to be some mixed reception there, just like with Mark Wahlberg as the Blue Falcon. Now, I try not to be a purist when it comes to reimagining older characters for newer movies. I like to keep an open mind. I don't necessarily like judging something strictly based on how it compared to older source material. Like, I'm not saying don't make comparisons altogether. You can. But I feel an adaptation or a remake should first and foremost be judged on its own merits. Now, I know there was some disappointment over the casting of Will Forte as Shaggy over Matthew Lillard. Apparently, Lillard wasn't even formally told he was getting replaced, and he's almost exclusively voiced the character ever since he played him in the live-action movies. It's upsetting. I do like Matthew Lillard, but I will say Will Forte does a pretty good interpretation of the character. In fact, I'd say besides Scooby, Shaggy is the only character who's an exact replica of how he is in the older shows. The rest of the Mystery Inc. gang is a bit of a different story. There's a hint of their respective personalities at the beginning when they all first meet. Fred's the leader, Daphne's always getting in danger, Velma's the one putting the clues together, but after their introduction, they kind of just throw all that out. Outside of Fred for a little bit towards the end, there's not really much of a personality or anything substantially done with the rest of the team. They're pushed to the sidelines pretty early on and just spend most of the movie looking for Shaggy and Scooby. And I had no problem with the casting of Zac Efron, Amanda Seyfried, and Gina Rodriguez as Fred, Daphne, and Velma respectively. They all did fine with what they were given, but the thing is, they weren't given much. Their dynamic wasn't unique. They mostly act as one giant package deal, sharing almost the exact amount of screen time together. And their dialogue is mainly reduced to them taking turns saying a sentence each, completing the other's train of thought. They have some funny moments here and there, but there's not much they say that really enhances their personalities or character traits. Side note, I found it kind of odd they brought back Frank Welker as the voice of Scooby Doo, but he's also been the voice of Fred since the original show, as well as Dynamite, who's also in this movie, yet they replaced him for both those roles. Like, I know we're going with big name celebrities to fill out the cast, but still, you already were bringing the original guy in. Speaking of Dynamite, here he's voiced by Jeong, and instead of the goofy, dim-witted sidekick to the original Blue Falcon, he acts more as a scolding parent to the Blue Falcon's son. He gets on his case, he tells him to take things more seriously, he's always getting annoyed. Now, I have no problem with Jeong, but this was just a bad take, and that's more on the writing than anything. When your character is someone who's constantly just pissed off all the time and doesn't do anything besides just be negative, it's not going to be a character I'm going to particularly care for. We also get a brief appearance by Captain Caveman, here voiced by Tracy Morgan, as well as one of the teen angels, Dee Dee Sykes, played by Kiersey Clemons, who here works with the Blue Falcon instead of Captain Caveman. And she was fine. Like Fred, Daphne, and Velma, she's only given so much to do. She's there to run things with Dynamite, she solves a few mysteries, and that's about it. Tracy Morgan, though, doesn't necessarily play Captain Caveman, but more so plays himself, whose name just happens to be Captain Caveman. Similar to Mark Wahlberg, he just uses his normal speaking voice, sometimes delivering lines in the style of how he did on 30 Rock. Like, I had a hard time actually seeing Captain Caveman here. And how you view the character all depends on how much you like Tracy Morgan's style of comedy. If you think he's funny, you might enjoy him here. But to be perfectly honest, I'm not the biggest fan of him, so this was a bit of a letdown for me. Of all the reimagined characters, though, the best by far for me was Jason Isaacs as Dick Dastardly. This is a complete change of pace for this character, and I loved it. He's much more cunning and a lot more successful at his schemes than his television counterpart, and he felt more like a legitimate threat. So even though the conflict itself can sometimes feel run-of-the-mill, seeing Dick Dastardly in action was great. Plus, despite the changes, the heart of the character was still there. Dick Dastardly was always portrayed as this over-the-top parody of old-time, mustache-twirling silent movie villains, and that's still present here. Jason Isaacs' voiceover work is scene-chewing, and he was especially funny whenever he'd get into petty arguments when someone would interrupt him while making a grandiose speech. A good villain is just as important as a good protagonist, and here they succeeded on that front. So that was a big plus for me. This was a fun movie. It's definitely going to be a lot more rewarding if you were a fan of these characters growing up. I could see people who didn't have a strong opinion of Scooby Doo to begin with not care for this so much. Especially since, truth be told, the story isn't anything special. But I think there's a heartfelt message about friendship that kids will certainly appreciate. Plus, it's very funny and energetic, keeping that same spirit of the original show, while adding fresh spins that I'm sure all audiences can enjoy. Scoob gets a 7 out of 10. So if this does well, the idea is that we're going to get more of these Hanna-Barbera movies, which I think can be fun. They certainly have a lot of characters to choose from, and they can be entertaining if done right. The Flintstones, the Jetsons, Johnny Quest, Birdman. Personally though, I'm hoping we get Hong Kong Phooey at some point in the future. That one's an underrated classic. So let me know, did you see Scoob or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you like the updated characters? Did you like the callbacks to the original shows? And what's the next movie you want to see in this Hanna-Barbera cinematic universe? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, if you like what you see, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next time.